I had no idea that I wanted to go into sales. I just had this feeling that I wanted to stay in science. I didn't want to study for 4 years in science and then go and, I don't know, go into finance or accounting. I enjoyed maths at school, so I thought about it, but I thought, no, there's a lack of women in science.
Yes.
And I obviously find it very interesting. So I'm going to try and get a job in science. And that's what I went with. So I applied, like I said, for 60, and they were hugely varying. Some were PhDs, some were sales. I can't even remember what the rest were. But yeah, when it's the right fit, you'll get it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Blooming Lake Scientists. I'm kind of cheating this week because I've got someone on here that used to be my line manager. And this is Lucy Murray at ADInstruments. And basically, I worked for ADInstruments last year as business development manager, where Lucy was my line manager. And I remember meeting her. And after the first couple of weeks thinking, yeah, this is my kind of girl, this is. Because she was just very direct, but in a kind of good way, lots of empathy, which I think is a rare combination, and it's a winning combination. And so she's one of the reasons why I actually went back to ADI. But anyway, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Lucy.
Thanks, Martina. I didn't know that, so that's nice. I'm Lucy. I work at ADI as the education sales manager. I know that internal job titles don't really mean much. So what that actually means is I manage a team of sales, customer success, and business development people across Europe. And day to day, that looks like a lot of people management, but also a lot of strategy, both within my team and then cross-functionally with marketing, and also some involvement with like global direction and influence on product lines and things like that.
Out of all of those things, what would you say is the most challenging?
That's such a good question. I mean, people management is challenging. You can't deny that. It's brilliant and it's rewarding at the same time. But it's challenging because you go through phases where sometimes every day you're firefighting something different, whether it's somebody's made a mistake, because things change a lot and there's, constantly things to keep up with. And especially at ADI, there's new systems that people are learning and people do make mistakes, which is normal. But it can also be, a customer says, oh yeah, we've got all this money to spend. Oh, but we need the quote yesterday. So there's things like that, which can be a challenge. And then obviously, because you're managing people, there's personal things as well. So you've got to allow, people time and space to sometimes not be on their top performance.
I already knew that the people management was obviously going to be the answer, because I think in every company, of course, everyone's so different. No one's the same. And I never used to appreciate just how difficult that part of a job was. And actually, it turns out that's often, like you say, the most rewarding, but also the most difficult. So I was just on a call with someone else who said the most difficult part of anything is always having to work with people you wouldn't necessarily align with in your normal life. So as a manager, how do you overcome that part?
I think that everybody in your team has strengths that are your weaknesses. So you have to remember that. Sometimes it is more difficult to communicate effectively with people that are a bit different to you. And I would say that's, something that I constantly need to work on and have a lot of area for improvement, because you might say something which makes perfect sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to the person you're saying it to, and you have to find a different way to help them understand it. But yeah, I feel like even though everybody is different, and it's good to have a team of people that are very different because you get different perspectives, which is actually a huge value. So you just have to remember that there is value in difference and try and capitalize on that rather than see it as a challenge.
I have to say, I mean, without, just spending the whole episode bigging you up, that was one of the things I really loved about you, was that you always seem to be a person who's looking to develop, and you're never like, well, this is just who I am, people will have to deal with it. you're always very much, well, I know this is how I am, because, we are both very direct people, as we know. And that isn't, it's great, but it isn't, sometimes you can't be. And you're always very much like, well, I'm trying to learn how to communicate better in different types of ways. And I think there are so many managers who just don't do that. They just don't take the time to do that.
I have to say, it surprises me how many people don't self-reflect much and don't seem to pick up on their weaknesses. I'm probably the opposite. I'm a huge critic of myself and probably overcritical. But I think that helps with me realizing all of the flaws that I have and trying to work on them.
Yeah, I think that's so important. That's what makes someone a good manager, the ability to do that.
But also asking for feedback. So I appreciate that, it can be a bit scary giving your boss feedback. But I always ask my team, and sometimes they don't do it sort of totally directly, but that, you can get feedback in so many different ways. And I appreciate it because, you don't always know how you're going to come across to somebody else. And actually somebody just sort of pointing something out to you can really help you sort of see yourself from a different angle and therefore work on that. And certainly when I was starting out, even more so in reflection, I just think if I'd had the confidence to just give the person I was reporting to feedback about, the way they communicated with me caused me so much frustration, then I feel like I would have enjoyed my job a bit more, but it's a really difficult thing to do.
I feel like that's where it's such a strength to have a team that is so diverse and different from you. Because, you've asked me for feedback before, and I really struggle to give you feedback because we're so similar. So I struggle. This sounds terrible. So I struggle to see the bad because I'm like, well, it's just like me. I'm only joking, guys. I do know I've got flaws. No, but what I mean is when someone's very different to you, it's so much easier to get feedback from, because they're different. They would approach things in a different way, whereas I would approach things in the same way.
Yeah.
So it's not helpful.
Yeah, no, I learned something like that recently, actually. So somebody in my team, or some people in my team, I've struggled to find sort of areas for development more than others. And usually it's the people that are a bit more experienced. But I really noticed that by talking to somebody else and saying, okay, well, how do you two work together? It helped me identify areas of weakness, not weakness, but areas for improvement or ways to do things different in the person that often I struggle to see something. Because often when you talk to somebody and they talk you through what they do, it's all very logical. But then when you take a sort of one step removed and hear it from a different angle, sometimes you can be like, okay, well, that doesn't make quite so much sense. Maybe it's because it's not being explained as effectively, but I found it an interesting way to sort of try and find the weak links, I suppose.
So, sorry, so you asked you asked someone that works with them?
It wasn't like, oh, I went out of my way to try and find problems with somebody.
Oh, no, I know.
I was having a conversation with somebody in my team, and she was talking about a project that they're working on together. And then by going through, steps of that, it helped me identify, areas for improvement.
I realise this is not a leadership podcast, but I think now we've started talking about it, we should ask the question. So you have leadership skills that take people years and years to develop. So how have you developed those skills? Have you turned to coaches? Have you read books? How have you developed those skills so quickly?
What skills do you mean?
Well, so reflection is a skill. Not everybody can do it for a start, but also the way you just said, well, I approached that because I thought, well, I'll ask the person who works with them and get feedback that way. Not everybody thinks like that. So is that something you've learned? Is that something that just comes naturally to you?
In terms of reflection, I think that's natural because I've always sort of tried to understand how I come across to others and tried to improve myself. I think everybody's got a lot of room for improvement, so I try and do a little bit. In terms of the second thing you said, it didn't cross my mind that was not the way other people's brains work. I think it just must be the way my brain works. Over the years, I haven't done that much in terms of looking for using external sources to develop myself. But in the last, I'd say, 6 months to a year. Well, when I first got this job 2 years ago, I did a brilliant course and I did quite a lot of like external reading then. And then I was sort of so busy with the job that I didn't do anything for about a year. And yet, so coming into this year, I've been doing a lot, and I've really noticed that has been hugely helpful. You know, there's so much you don't know, and there's so many people out there with years of experience and really valuable experience to pull from. So I just think if you're not immersing yourself in at least some of that content that's available, you know, you're really sort of not helping yourself. Some useful things I've done are just listen to some podcasts, and it's even things that are, you know, repeating basic sales things like qualification, but it's amazing, you know, what you forget in terms of best practice if you don't remind yourself of it and refresh yourself. Also podcasts on like negotiation. I read Chris Voss's book. What's it called again?
Never Split the
Difference. I read Find Your Why.
Oh yeah.
Or
Simon
Leaders
Sinek.
Eat Last. Is it Leaders Eat Last? Yeah, Simon Sinek. I read another one too, but it's slipping my mind. I've also recently joined Pavilion, which is really interesting. There's loads of go-to-market leaders in there, and actually, I've only been on it a month or so, but it's been really valuable so far.
There's so much stuff now that you can dig into. I mean, I know, you know, it does take a lot of time, but even on LinkedIn, if you follow the right people, you can learn huge amounts from them.
Yeah, and it's even like you say on LinkedIn, it's say somebody said something and then the comments. I often like reading the comments because you get some really useful stuff, but it's also quite funny when you see somebody with just, you know, deliberately trying to be antagonistic, and that just makes me laugh.
Yeah, you see that a lot.
Yeah.
I never understand that approach, but I feel like that's a subject for another day. So I guess the next question is, well, the next thing I wanted to ask you is, where did this all start? Because of course you do have a science background. So talk to us about like the choices you made, you know, from school and going into university. What did that look like?
Well, at school, I never really thought I was very intelligent because I think a lot of my friends were intelligent, and compared to them, I was just average. And I don't know, growing up in Oxfordshire, maybe like the school really pushed everybody to go to uni, and it was just a state school. But yeah, it was just that environment. And then I went to uni because I didn't really know what else to do, and it looked like fun. But I had a gap year first, and I knew because I failed all of my ASs.
Oh, I never knew that about you.
Because I was too busy doing sport and sport coaching, and I was like, oh well, GCSEs were fine, like A levels would be fine too. And then I got DEUU. Yeah, so that was quite a lesson learned, and I had to sort of beg my teachers not to make me redo the year because I didn't want to redo the year with the year below. I wanted to stay with all my mates, you know. So I had to work doubly hard in the second year. I had to resit every single exam from AS and A level in my second year. So that was quite a journey.
No.
But only for 3 subjects. So I dropped one. I dropped physics because my brain just doesn't work that way anyway. I realised that a bit too late. But I did maths, biology and PE. And yeah, and then I got A, B, D in the end. Biology again. I like the human stuff, don't like the cell stuff.
We're the opposite.
Yeah, so after that, I was like, oh, I don't want to go to uni yet. Like, I want to go travel. I've always wanted to travel as much as possible. And it was quite a sore subject with my dad because it was the year that the fees went up. So if I'd gone to uni straight away, the fees would have been lower. But taking a gap year, the fees went up by like 3 times. So my dad was really mad at me, but I was like, whatever, bye. Anyway, so I went and did
traveling.
Yeah, so I went and just did loads of travel. I did a ski season, just had a really good year. And then I was in a much better frame of mind to go into uni, and I chose a different course because I was looking at physio and had quite a lot of insecurities about not getting in on the grades that I was going to get. You know how you're 18 and you don't know what you want to do. Anyway, I went into sport and exercise nutrition at Northumbria, and I loved it. It was a really good course. And I think because I'd failed before, I knew how awful it felt, and I didn't want to do that again. So I had a great time, don't get me wrong, but I did work hard as well.
I feel like there's so many things you've said there that I want to ask questions about. I mean, the first one is at the very first bit you said, my friends were all more intelligent than me, because clearly you are hugely intelligent. There's no denying it. So is the problem just that it's how they measure intelligence that's the problem, and not that you're not intelligent?
I think it's comparison. So, the friendship group that I had, like 3 of them have gone on to be doctors. I've lost touch with a lot of them, to be honest. But yeah, a lot of them were just really smart. So in comparison, my grades were lower, and therefore I thought I wasn't that smart. But I mean, if I compare myself,
but you are at different things.
Well, yeah. Also, I didn't really realize some of the things that I was good at until the last couple of years, really. A late bloomer in terms of like self-reflection, but again, you realize the things that you're not good at more than the things that you're good at. And actually, I don't know, sometime in the last year, my boss gave me some really useful advice, and he was like, you can't be perfect, and actually sometimes it's better to improve your strengths and capitalize on those rather than try and work on every single weakness, because you can't change who you are.
You can't. And I mean, you've learnt that way earlier than I ever did. Because I mean, I did a post about this yesterday, but perfectionism killed me for years. I mean, up until about 3-4 years ago, I was still like that, striving for perfectionism in everything. And it's crippling because you can't do it. So all it does is cause you stress. And I agree with what your boss has said. Do we have the same boss? Are we talking about the same person? But yeah, someone told me about 4 or 5 years ago that you should just strive to improve yourself by like 1%. And that's a massive amount, rather than trying to aim for like the sky. Just think about that 1%. And that's definitely worked for me.
Yeah.
Which is similar to what you're saying.
Yeah. Stop comparing yourself to other people and actually just try and be a better version of yourself. It reminds me of, it was an actor, I can't remember who off the top of my head, but he did a speech after winning an award, and he just said, my biggest idol or whatever is future me, because you know how great you want to be, and so you'll always work and aspire to be that person. But obviously it's future you, so you never get there. So it's just about improving yourself a bit every day and becoming the person that you would look up to, which I like.
Oh yeah, I really like that. But in terms of so like you went traveling for a year before uni, and you said that put you in a better frame of mind. So what do you mean by that? How did having a break from education help you?
I just knew I wanted to go and have fun, and I didn't just want to, when I was younger, I just saw people that would study, and then work. And I was just like, where's the fun in that? That doesn't look fun at all. Like, why are people not taking opportunities to go and do interesting exploring? And there's so much to see and so much fun to be had. Why would you just lock yourself into convention? So obviously, we'd been at school because we had to be at school for as long as we could remember. And fair enough, you didn't have to do your A-levels, but it made sense. But, why force yourself straight into uni when actually, well, I appreciate that people around me had gap years and travelled, and so it was quite normalised for me, but I appreciate that people from different regions, it wouldn't be as normal, and so just going straight into university so that you can get a good job would be more normal for them. But, taking a year out, especially before uni, is absolutely no detriment to anybody. In fact, I think it's it's better. It develops you as a more well-rounded person, and it probably helps you go into university like just a bit more grown up, and a bit more prepared to be like, okay, this is my future, let's invest in it, rather than, I mean, we still work in selling to the education industry. You know, all of our customers are the lecturers that are teaching people that have gone straight from school to uni, and the students that have taken gap years. And it's amazing what they're saying about students just like turn up and expect to be spoon-fed, don't know how to look after themselves, like don't know how to conduct themselves professionally. And you just think, you know, if young people don't take any responsibility for sort of developing themselves and exposing themselves to new things, A, they're not very employable, and B, they're not really making the most of their opportunities. And I just didn't want to be like that.
I mean, now I'm older, I can look at that and go, that's such a great thing to do. But when I was younger, it's going to sound so weird to you, but I couldn't see it because obviously my upbringing was so different and nobody did that. And I just grew up with parents that were like, oh, well, why would you waste your time going traveling, just frivolously going around the world while we're all paying our taxes? It was all a bit like that. So I just didn't think, I used to think, oh, you know, only the really privileged do that, which of course is not true. And you know now, like my kids, one of them's already in Australia, one of them's going to Australia next year. And I can see the benefit. And I, you know, like you, I say to them, see the world, see different cultures, because I think people think a gap year is like just fun, and it is fun, don't get me wrong. But for you, it must have been such a learning curve as well.
Yeah. I mean, think you're 18 and you're getting on a flight to the other side of the world or halfway around the world on your own. And you get off the plane and you immediately have to immerse yourself in something. And I mean, I know it freaks some people out, but I'm not a planner. I'll book the flight and maybe the first night accommodation, and then I'm like, oh, I'm sure it'll work out. It'll be fine, because I can't be because I can't be bothered to do the research. I'm like, I'm sure when I get there, I'll speak to some people and they'll tell me some really good things to do, and that's fine. And yeah, I don't know whether it's lazy or stupid or whatever. I don't know. But
it actually amazes me that you're like that, because you're not like that at work.
I know, different. But I like small bits of chaos. I enjoy it. So yeah, especially when you're traveling, just getting off the plane and being like, right, where should we go? It's just, I love it. Because you probably will be fine. And what an experience of being like, okay, well, what should we do today? I don't know. Let's go and, I don't know, get a train to JB and then work our way up Malaysia over the next week. So yeah.
Like what you've just described is a learning curve. Yeah. You know, you're doing things off the cuff by yourself, having to wing it basically.
Well, there's nothing like being at a train station in a foreign country where you can't read anything. And you have to try and communicate with somebody that neither of you speak the same language, and you try and communicate about where you're going and how to get there. And I don't know, it usually works out. Most people are happy to help.
Yeah, I feel like that's where you're so much more chilled than I am, because, you know, we've talked about this before. I would have to have like my itinerary, know where I'm going, know what, like I'd have my speech written out so that I could try and read out what I needed to ask. Like, it's just ridiculous. But let's quickly go back to your degree, because you did a degree in sports and nutrition, you said. Mm-hmm. And obviously once you did that, you then moved into sales, right? After you had a short break.
So I did a master's as well, because again, I wasn't ready for like the reality of real work. I didn't feel like a degree was enough to sort of then go into a career and differentiate me. And also I wanted to just keep having fun. So
I love the honesty here.
Yeah. I just used to think that work was emails and meetings, and to be honest, I wasn't wrong. It is, but it's a bit more interesting than that. But yeah, so I wasn't ready to do that. So I did a sport and exercise science research masters at Northumbria as well. I did apply for one in Liverpool, but it was already full, I think. anyway, so it was like a research master's, so that it was only 50% taught and 50% a big research project. So more similar to, closer to like a big PhD research project in a way. Yeah. So you spent 50% of your time for the whole year working on this research project, which was really interesting. So I did the effect of polyphenols on vascular function. Yeah, so I enjoyed that. And then after my master's, I just worked for a few months as a lifeguard, which I'd done, throughout uni as well. And then I went to Indonesia for 3 months and trained as a dive master. Again, I think I just didn't want to go straight from studying hard for 4 years to working hard forever. So I didn't. I worked as a lifeguard and then went to Indonesia for 3 months, and then I did some traveling like across Europe as well. And then when I got back, I was like, right, okay, I was 24 by then. I was like, right, okay, I need to get a proper job. I need to become an adult. But it took me 6 months. I applied for about 60 jobs. I probably had somewhere between 5 and 10 interviews. And then eventually my old boss at ADI was like, I can't believe how many things you've done in your 24 years, but and none of them are a proper job. But because, between every uni year, I'd either traveled or volunteered or done work experience. So I'd had quite a few jobs, as like part-time jobs as well. And he liked that, so he gave me a job, which was great. And obviously my education was relevant, blah, blah, blah. So I started at ADI November 2017. And I've been here ever since, but I have done 4 roles.
Yeah. I mean, it is crazy how much experience you have. I mean, I know you say not a proper job, but obviously those other experiences are hugely valuable. Just because you don't get paid to do certain things like travel doesn't mean they're not worth anything. But when you moved into sales, what were your initial thoughts about what sales was going to be like?
I mean, I had to do quite a lot of research for the interviews, but both my parents had actually been in sales. So I'd sort of kind of unaware, but been around it for a while. Not that I'd really sat in on what my parents did for work, but, you hear about small bits of conversation, or I heard my dad on work calls sometimes. So I guess you pick things up, but I knew it was speaking to customers, and well, in this case, I knew I wanted to stay in science. So I wanted to talk to customers about science and associate with scientists. I didn't know much, to be honest, in the grand scheme of things going into this job interview, but I learned pretty quickly that, obviously scientists are very intelligent people, and you certainly don't want to sell them the wrong thing. So you are more of a consultant, helping them identify whether what you offer is what they need. Then, because obviously most people think of salespeople as like car salesmen that are, or sort of bell boys that are just trying to make a quick buck. But that's not it at all, because, so much of it is repeat business. If you sell people the wrong thing, they're not going to come back, and then you're screwed and you're out of a job. So that's really not the intention. And once I actually did sell somebody the completely wrong thing, because, well, I don't know, just you make mistakes. But luckily he was a really nice customer, and he just sort of laughed at me and was like, don't worry, we're going to use that anyway soon enough for some research. So can you actually just tell me the right thing now?
Yeah, because scientists are, I mean, not, of course, not all scientists fit into a box, but we are kind of renowned for being a bit fussy, and not fussy, but we know what we want. And I think scientists also don't like the typical sales approach. They just don't like it because, excuse my language, it feels like BS, and they hate it. So I guess, but for you, I guess having been in that environment already, you kind of had experienced that. So you knew that that was not the approach to take.
I'm also the first person to criticize salespeople, like when you can tell they're like hard selling you. So, when you, I don't know, you go to a shop or something and they bother you. I hate that. And people that like people that call you from Vodafone, and it's their job. You don't want to be rude to them, but at the same time, you're like, if I wanted an iPad, I would go to the shop and buy one. Leave me alone. So there's no point in taking that approach with sort of intelligent people where you're actually trying to find a solution for them. The thing to remember with our market especially is that a lot of people don't have the time to go out and find and keep up to date with all the new tech out there and sort of understand how it could benefit them. So our job is to take that to people and sort of say, did you know that this might be useful to you? And if you're interested, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about it. Rather than, oh, here, I've got this target to meet, so will you just hurry up and buy it?
Yeah, that's never going to work. Do you know what's interesting, though? That bit you just said about like, oh, if I wanted to buy this, I'd go out and buy it. I don't need you to call me. That's so interesting, Lucy, because do you know how many companies in biotech and life science don't understand this? They forget. When you move into like roles like sales and marketing, often what happens is you forget what it's like when you're the person on the other end of this, and you follow strict instructions about what marketing and sales should look like, and you end up down this tunnel where you've totally forgotten what's happening to the person on the other end of the phone. You've totally forgotten that person is actually thinking what you just said. Well, if I wanted that, I'd go out and buy it myself. And so I think, the fact that you've made that connection, that's why it's such a great team, because you understand that. And that was one of the things I appreciated about you and ADI, was that they still kind of have the human aspect in mind all the time. And don't you think that's so important in sales?
Absolutely. I think obviously depending on the product you're selling, it can vary quite a lot, but certainly in our industry, you can't forget that. These are normal people that don't have a lot of time to waste. They're intelligent. A lot of them like doing the research, but just don't necessarily have the time. I think it depends on the value of the sale as well, because like you say, if it's something that is not a lot of money, then you might just go onto Amazon or whatever and just order it. But some of these things are quite a big investment, so you have to approach it in the right way.
Yeah, I agree. So actually, one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about today was, so I'm always intrigued about this. So when I first worked for you and I learned that you've always been into sports, and you're still really into like fitness, aren't you? And I started to see in other people as well that there was this kind of association where people who did sports for a very long time during their life were really good at being able to, sorry, not that I'm saying you fail all the time, but they're really good at being able to fail and not take it personally and just move on and go, oh, well, that's fine. I made a mistake. Like I'll just do something else differently next time. And I've always found that so interesting, because I'm not a team sport person at all. Do you think that has played a role in your success?
I've never really given it that much thought, but probably. I mean, failing is crippling, but yeah, I guess you're right. Every time that you do sort of put yourself out there, and you fail, then you learn something from it. I've never been particularly good at team sports either. I mean, I've done them to very average levels, but I've had more success in individual sports. But in a way, then the pressure is all on you. But when you fail, it's also all on you as well. And I actually boxed at uni. I guess the crippling failure, I think immediately of when I boxed at uni and I had 4 fights and I won 2 and I lost 2. And the feeling of winning was incredible, but the feeling of losing was awful, because not only had you just been punched in the face quite a lot and you're a bit sore and you were exhausted and you couldn't breathe because it's so physically demanding, but also it's just that, you feel a bit humiliated because you've done it in front of a crowd and you've lost, and then you replay everything and you think of all the things that you could or should have done differently, if you could move faster or if you could breathe, or whatever. And you have to really take some time to process all of that. And then try and find a way to just be like, okay, well, this happened, but let's move on. Let's find what to work on so it doesn't happen next time. And then you just sort of get on with it. So, yeah, I guess in a way, it probably did teach me a few lessons. And luckily in business, nobody punches you in the face. So,
well, not physically.
Not yet, anyway.
There's still time. Yeah, I just remember having a conversation with somebody last year on this podcast who actually had been into soccer or was an athlete or something and was in sales. And we'd had this discussion and I'd actually brought you up in the conversation and said, I don't think it's a coincidence that you also had a very similar background and that there is this process of okay, that went wrong. What do I do next time? How do I make that better? And it seemed to be a really good approach.
I do think that, I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it's in everybody, but there's fear of failure in everybody. And I think that that's true across everybody, no matter how much sport or anything else that you've done. But I guess it's your exposure to it probably helps, and the learning of getting back up from it. And I guess people have different levels of fear of failure on different things. But I definitely feel fear of failure in a lot of things. But maybe it holds me back in different ways than to other people. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because that's a good question. If you do have a fear of failure, so when it happens, what is your process for dealing with that? How does it make you feel? Do you feel like you've got better at dealing with it?
Probably, yes. I feel like I'm not as afraid to put myself out there, especially in a business context. I think that comes with confidence in sort of your knowledge and your ability. But when it's something totally new to you, then I think it's probably more intimidating. But also depending on the type of person you are, so some people find new challenges at work sort of overwhelmingly scary because you could fail. But actually, I find it more in personal things. So, making big life decisions, I find the hardest because you don't know what's going to change when. So, making decisions on that, I actually find the most challenging because you don't want to get it wrong because it's your life,
Yeah, that is way more difficult, I would say, than work.
Yeah, but some people find work more extreme in that way because, getting fired, for example, would be horrendous to pretty much everybody. Or, I don't know, not going for a job because they think they're not good enough. That would be a huge one for pretty much, most people.
Yeah.
And again, the sort of embarrassment that might come with it if you sort of say the wrong thing or whatever.
Yeah, I guess all of that comes with either experience or some form of mentorship or coaching when you're less experienced. Actually saying that, in terms of mentorship and coaching, have you had a lot of that?
For work?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, on and off, I'd say. At the start at ADI, I have to say I didn't really have enough. I don't think I've learned as much as I could from people with more experience than me at the start. And then I've sort of always asked for further development, and that's come in sort of various forms, whether it's from managers or external courses. So that really helped. And then, when there's been somebody at work that I've wanted to learn from, I've just gone to them directly and said, "Oh, can you mentor me? I basically want to understand more about what you do, because then I'll understand more what I'm doing and why it's important." And I've always been a person that likes to sort of understand why I'm doing everything. If you just tell me, my stepdad always says I would be brilliant in the army, apart from the fact that I can't be told what to do. Because if they couldn't give me a good reason for doing something, I'd say, well, that sounds like a waste of time. I'm not doing it. Whereas, and obviously, they can't always do that. So yeah, I like to know why I'm doing things.
I actually think that's like the most important thing ever.
Yeah.
In any job, the people that know when to ask why are the people that belong in leadership positions, if you ask me. If you cannot ask why and pick and choose what you need to move forward with and what you need to stop, that's not leadership. That's just winging it and going along with absolutely everything without asking any questions. So the why is like massively important.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't understand why you're doing something, then why are you putting energy into it? It just doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Yeah, I would agree. One of the last questions I wanted to ask you actually is, so people will listen to this and there'll be different kind of generations listening to it, but people, there'll be people like at say 18 or 20 wondering what to do with their lives, thinking that they've got to take the normal route, I must go to school, I must go to college, I must go to uni. What advice would you give to them?
Follow your instincts. I've just realised the point I wanted to make from the thing before, which was learning from people more experienced than you, whether that's in business or in life, is really useful. But you don't have to take everything they say as sort of gospel. But if you try and learn from so many sources, then you'll understand what's reasonable and what's normal, and where the boundaries are of everything. And I think that really applies, when you're thinking about what to do. Everyone's going to have a different opinion about what you should do, but nobody is you. So all you can do is ask them and get some ideas. But really, you've got to go with your instincts, which is, if you feel like you can't go straight into education again because you want to just go and have some fun, or you want to do something different, or you're not sure, then don't. It doesn't matter if you go to uni a year, 2 year, 5 years late. It doesn't matter.
Or 10.
10 years late, yeah. And likewise with work, I had no idea that I wanted to go into sales. I just had this feeling that I wanted to stay in science. I didn't want to study for 4 years in science and then go and, go into finance or accounting. I enjoyed maths at school, so I thought about it, but I thought, no, there's a lack of women in science.
Yes.
And I obviously find it very interesting. So I'm going to try and get a job in science. And that's what I went with. So I applied, like I said, for 60, and they were hugely varying. Some were PhDs, some were sales. I can't even remember what the rest were. But yeah, when it's the right fit, you'll get it. And things will work out. And then as I've been at ADI longer, I never thought I'd be at ADI for coming on 7 years, but here I am and I'm really enjoying it. But that's because I've learned so much along the way, and I've been able to have, different roles and lots of different experiences and responsibilities. But, if you'd said to me on my first day, oh, you'll still be here in 2024, I would have said, no, I won't. That was ridiculous.
But you have had variety, and I think for someone like you, and I'm very similar, that helps.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't have stayed in the same role for 6.5 years. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it wouldn't have worked for me.
Me neither.
If I don't feel like I'm learning or evolving or, improving, then I do get bored.
Before, I'm not going to ask you any more questions, but I did just want to tell you that actually I learned so much from you. I remember someone saying to me, this was actually on LinkedIn after I left last year. The first time I worked at ADI, everyone.
Second time.
But after I left, someone said, who's the best manager you've had, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you. And I said, and it was all about, it was about generations and age. And I was like, well, actually, the best manager I've ever had is 12 years younger than me. So I don't think that age and experience is always a reflection of, a great manager. But I just wanted to let you know that, because I don't know if you ever know, because you said, oh, I learn from people more experienced, but don't forget, we also learn from people around us. I mean, I've learned so much from you. Just wanted you to know that.
Thank you. But no, you're totally right. It's a really good reminder that everybody has a different perspective.
Yeah.
And there's always something to learn from everybody. And you're right, experience doesn't necessarily mean that they're better. Because you could be really crap at your job, but stay in it for a decade. And that does not mean that they're any better than somebody that's had the same job for a year. So that's definitely worth remembering, for sure.
Someone told me that if you stay in the same role for 10 years, you're effectively doing the same. You've got 1 year's experience 10 times.
Yeah,
which
true.
Is kind of there. Yeah. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming on here, Lucy. And to anyone that's listening, I would keep your eye on her, because she's definitely going to be the CEO of something very soon. I just know it. I'm gonna push her into that role. I don't care. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming on here, because I know is this like the first podcast you've ever done? Yeah, no, it was really good. It was really good. It was brilliant. And you had so much valuable stuff to say. So thank you.
Thanks for inviting me. It's been a learning experience.
There you go. You can do more now.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Martina.